My friend, today I'm going to talk about something called the seventh chord. If you're just joining me to this channel, please subscribe, thumbs up, put something cool in the comment section. My name is WAGO Howard. I teach music in Hilo, Hawaii at Big Island Guitars. I am one of several teachers here. My thing that I really enjoy is like music theory. It's a little above and beyond. However, each one of these has a little bit of like a tip or something that you might be able to take and put into your own music. If you like this type of thing, please subscribe. As I said, on Tuesdays I do the music theory. There is some new different aspects, so if you don't enjoy this one, maybe go check out some of the other ones. They talk about chord construction, talk about part writing, all sorts of stuff that is basic music theory 101. And then once a month I do an interview with a local musician or a musician abroad. And then next year I'm going to check back in with them to see how things have gone, what steps they've taken, and then what has happened that they didn't like or that they did like. But for Mondays, what I do is I like to go through songs that I've written on my own channel, which means if you have time, one of the things as you can see, there's a plethora of information and musical related concepts on this page. What I'd really love for you to do is check out the webpage and see what you can come up with. If you have any questions, doesn't matter what comment section you put it in. If you ask a question, I will get to it promptly and I will answer it. If I don't know the answer to it, I will ask that question from my teacher and then I will get back to you. Nice hair. So today it's going to be about the seventh chord. If you've already been playing, this video is for you. Does not matter what your what your instrument is. We're going to, what do I have near me? I've got the harp, I've got a guitar, I've got a ukulele, and then I have the piano set up as well, I hope. Let me see here if I... Yes. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to show a couple concepts on how to use our triad. So if you don't already know what a triad is, I would suggest going back and watching one of the other explanations, or just pause this, go Google what a triad is. I'm going to do my best to fill you in here on a couple different ideas. One of them is called the grand staff. Now, when we draw this staff out, it is not significant. It will be significant. Oh, those are horribly drawn. Anywho, there's 5 lines up here, there's 5 lines down there, which means when we have this 5-note system, if we connect them, this becomes a readable function. This here is called the grand staff because it combines 2 individual staffs. The top staff generally is called the G clef, and the bottom clef is generally called the F clef. There are different clefs that you can put these time signatures into, and then these key signatures. What this does when we start this process, it allows us to start seeing notes as being tertiary. Now, what does that mean? That means that when we have a note, like let's take this note, the line right underneath the treble clef is going to be called the C line, or middle C. When we go over to a piano, we play quite, oh, you know what, do I have a full piano here? Oh my goodness. When we do a C right here in the middle, we're taking into account that this C is not this C. Well, this is C4, C3, C2, C1. So when we see all of our tones, these notes in a key signature are part of a overtone series. Meaning when you hear a low octave, a fifth, our octave again, our third, you have resonation or vibration that happens with all of these notes together. Hence, sounds of triads start to sound good. In the key of C major, we just work those triads up, which means if we're going to be playing these notes, this C would skip the space of the D. It would play on the bottom line, which is the E, and then it would skip the F line and go right up to the G. Hence, whenever you see anything like this, you are looking at a triad. These have intervals. Now that's what we discussed last live video. We talked about how tertiary movements work and these positions of 2 different notes, which we call harmonies. So if you're with me up to this point, two notes played together as a harmony. The way that we stack them becomes how we call out these chords. So we're just going to do a brief recap on that, get rid of this, and show you another way to visualize what these are. So in a scale, we either have two types of scales in the Western ear. One would be the chromatic scale, which has 12 notes, and then a 13th note is the repeat. So essentially, what do you have? You have C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, and then it goes back to the prime, or the P8, the octave. When we play a note or a chord or a scale, all the notes that are inside all of these notes within a key signature make up our chord structures. So C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, and then we've got our C. The first two notes of each one of those are the tertiary harmony that defines the chord structure, meaning major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, minor, major. Now this last one, the reason why it's interesting is the stacking of those notes makes it not just a major third plus a minor third, or a minor third plus a major third. It makes it into a minor third plus a minor third. Thence, you would have your 5, 1, 3, and 5, and you would flatten your mediate and flatten your dominant, meaning we would actually put accidentals on it when we're in the key of C. Now, there are no sharps and flats in the key of C. If we were to take this amazing concept and go from just these notes that we defined as being a major triad, you just showed you how to do a diminished. If we were to put this, let's say, in the key of D, the diminished triad that would result from that, because it's a C sharp diminished, would still have this note, but I wouldn't have to change anything on this root note because the C has already been sharpened by the key signature. When we put up this next note, C sharp to an E, well, let's write this out. C sharp, E sharp, and G sharp should be our C sharp major, because when we look at the piano, 1, 3, 5, if we move each one of these up or we augment it by a half step, we get this. C sharp major, C sharp, E sharp, G sharp. So if I wanted to make this into a diminished, I would need to diminish that median from the E sharp back to the E natural. When we have the G sharp, if I diminish it by a half step, the smallest increment in the Western ear, we find ourselves playing a C sharp, E, and a G. So our C sharp, E, and G have become naturalized. Now, in most schools of thought, what we do is we do not just put those naturals there because they look a little bit like sharps. Whenever you see a note that has no sharp or flat, it is a natural note. The only other markings we will ever have, natural, we have a sharp, and then we have a double sharp. I think that I might have gone through, I don't know, 10, 15 years of just playing music and no clue there was a double sharp. There's also a double flat. So when we do the flat, all we're doing is talking about a note or notation, C sharp, E, and G. Right here, the look of a C major without the key signature is a major chord. In the key of D, that same thing spells out C sharp because of the accidental. It spells out the E and the G, which is our C sharp diminished. So one of the things that we do when we're trying to learn these is we learn the circle of fifths. That's what I'm going to take you to right now after we just define what these flats are. Now our double flat is just like our double sharp. Whenever we have these notes, we look at them. So let's just take one note in the key of... let's take the key of G as one sharp. That sharp is F sharp. So if we were to play that same thing, C, E, and G, we don't have an F sharp in there. There's no worry about that. Accidental. Doesn't matter. All these are accidentals. They change the note by value by augmenting or diminishing them. If we take this chord of the C major in the key of G, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, all of the triads that have an F in it will now be a F sharp because that's how we utilize key signatures. Hence, if we didn't have the F sharp in the key of G, our D would be a minor. But we don't want a natural F. We want a F sharp. So the idea is, if we're going to be using this concept, D to D sharp is a sharp. D to E is a double sharp. There is not a note or an accidental called a triple sharp. That just doesn't happen. Now, I don't want to get into the explanation right now on why that is. It actually works a lot better when we're talking about how to view intervals and then do chord analysis and part writing. It allows you to see what notes are inside the key signature and then how to judge those intervals, meaning there will always be an opposite antecedent for that. Primes, perfects become perfects, augmenteds become diminished, diminished become augmented, majors become minor. What do we mean? I'll give you a little quick peek if you're checking this out. If we have a note like in the key of, let's say, C. C to C is a P8. But if we go down a half step, this dissonance is called a major seventh, because the notes that we talked about last week on our live was minor second, major second, minor third, major third, perfect fourth, augmented fourth, perfect fifth, augmented fifth, major sixth, minor seventh, major seventh, P8. So when we view that going augmented, they have this tendency to have a minor, minor, augmented, augmented, perfect, perfect, minor, minor, major, major. And if that's confusing, when we go down, it gets even more confusing. Major 7, minor 7, major 6, minor 6. So an augmented fifth can also be explained as a diminished 6 or a minor 6. Our 5 chord can go to a flat 5, which we're going to talk about today in one of our chord constructions for a 7th. And then when we have this fourth, a fourth doesn't go down. It can augment down or diminish down, but we call this the major third. There really is no major or a minor fourth, fifth. That only is residing for our 2, 3, 6, and 7. Minor second, minor third, major third. Minor 6, major 6, minor 7, major 7. So, having known those different intervals from the one, that's what we're going to talk about right now. And again, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, take a minute to go look at that. In fact, these live stuffs are kind of fun. I really look forward to audience participation. But if there's nobody here while I'm doing it, because I either forgot to put it public, or just nobody's here at 9 o'clock in the morning, Hawaiian Standard Time. I know it's a weird time. What I would say is go back and watch these from the beginning. There's maybe a little bit of tip or something, a wealth of information that you might have skipped over while you were doing your own processes as far as learning. What I find is a lot of people on this channel happen to be from different countries. And one of the things I do is I talk really fast. I do apologize. That's just the way my brain works. If want to, you can go up here to the top, click that little gear and put it on 0.75. I might sound like this then. Cool. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is the aforementioned do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. You betcha. This is called a diatonic scale, meaning that the 1 and 6 share the same key signature, and that when we put these in that tertiary movement of making harmonies, whether it's a major and a minor, minor and a minor, major and a major, those make up our different triads. That's the next thing we're going to talk about. There is no augmented, so we are going to put that for last. The only triads that are found inside of a major scale are the major. And if you don't already know, lead sheets call this triangle a major. You can call it a C Maj 7 in the case of today. We're going to talk about what that means, or you could just call it a C minor 7. Or you could call it a C minor with a major 7. You could also call it a C major and then have a minor 7. What happens on all these things is they alter those triads 1, 3, 5 by adding another note that is not part of that overtone series. It will cause some dissonance, but when you realize that that dissonant note along with those other 2 triads create a beautiful chord, like in the major 7 case, it'll blow your mind. So what we want to do is understand these triads first. 1, 3, 5 major. Let's say in the case of C major, we would have a C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. Now I'm going to put the diminished marking right here because that's what we're going to talk about here in just a second. When we have a 1 flat 3 and a 5, we find ourselves having something called a minor. The lead sheets or chord sheets, chord charts, will use a hyphen, a minus sign. It denotes that the note that was a major or a natural now has been diminished. That note now gives you the tonality of having something which we would call sad, maybe? When we go over here, our 1, 3, 5 in the key of C, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, has C, E, and G. When we flatten the median by a half step, diminishing it, we get, well, here's the crux. When we're playing these different notes, we're actually seeing these in minor seconds. So when we have a chord construction of like a 1, 3, and a 5, we call it the major. It's using a symbol like this. And then if we were in the key of C, we would have C, E, and G. The construction of that is, as we said, 1, 3, 5. When we have 1 flat 3, 5 in the key of C, we get a minor. Oh, no. And that is a C, E flat, a G. When we have a diminished, we have a 1 flat 3 flat 5, which means the diminished, D-I-M-I-N-I-S-H-E-D. We have a little circle, and then that is represented either that way or we just put dim, mon, or maj. We just shorten. Music is about learning long form and then shortening everything, breaking rules, having fun with that concept. So this one, it goes C, E flat, and now we flatten the 5th, G flat. And then these are all the 3 chords that are found inside a major. We have a major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, and then diminished. The only other chord that we want to talk about is the chord construction of a 1, 3, and then a sharp 5. Now this is called an augmented chord because it causes tension on the 5th scale degree. Meaning, the 5th scale degree is called the dominant. It causes the ear in every single key to want to go from one side to the other. Meaning, if you have a the most pleasing sound would be either the 5 to the 1 or the 4 to the 1. Another really pleasing sound is a resolution, like the 7th tone, which is the last tone in a major scale, is a short distance of a half step because the increments betwixt the two have a half step between the 3 and the 4 and a half step between the 7 to 8, or the last tone, the major 7th, to the perfect 8th. When we play these types of intervals, we find ourselves hearing different types of structures. This is super pleasing. That has a little bit of dissonance, but it's not as dissonant as ooh-wee, which really sounds that way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Flat 6, minor. So C to a minor 6 is a dissonance. When we put this same note down here, we know since this is a minor 6 that this is going to be a major third. 6, 7, 8, 9. When we add up the numbers, they should always go to 9. Hence, earlier I aforementioned when you have a minor, it goes to a major. That's how we look at intervals. So when we're drawing these out, C, E, and then G sharp, we find ourselves having 4 different types of tones. I'm going to go play them again, of course, because I just want you to get familiar with those. Let's see here. All majors just have a really solid foundation and a feeling. There's a reason why when we go through our chord structures that not every single chord is going to be a major. It lacks something. Without having a chord which has a minor tonality, life isn't all just happy. Life has ups and downs. So does music. Major to a major to a major to a major to a major. It would just get boring after a certain period. Therefore, the minors in betwixt cause a little bit of tension. So when you do go back to a major, you find yourselves pulling towards this chord, which is called the dominant. So if we were to change any of these notes, like the dominant being turned into an augmented, we would sharpen the 5. Let's do this through the eyes of C again. C major, C augmented, C diminished, C minor. Excellent. So that brings us to today. Was that too long? It was 25 minutes of blah, blah, blah. If you're on the same page with me right now, this is actually where the lesson begins. When we have these chord constructions, we're talking about utilizing the notes of, let's see here. Ooh. Oh, thank you. We have the notes 1, 3, 5, and then we add a 7th. Now, we talked about the major 7th and the minor 7th. Yes, we are going to be playing the major 6th, but the idea is that is considered one of these double flats. If you're already lost, no worries. We're going to explain all of this in context. And the reason why we have these is because, frankly, the 4th note on top of that triad allows us to spice up our music. By moving that note, we are now causing tension. The tension that comes betwixt has it's almost like, how do I explain this? It's almost like a teeter-totter of sound. You've got a chord, which sounds good on its own if it's a major or a minor or a diminished or an augmented, within reason, depending how the tone sounds in that song. And then we take that note and then we put it over here and we utilize that as a function. So, if we're going to be doing this, and believe me, there's so many people that teach this out here. There's a great way just to explain that again. Something we would call like a major 7. Don't be scared. What we're talking about is that we're using the major, which is, in the case of C major, a C, E, and a G. There's our triad. And now if we add the major 7th, which is a B, the chord construction we get is called a C major 7. You could also see it's drawn out as like a C major 7 like this. This aforementioned up here is how I read it. Those are chordal analysis. Major 7. So when we going through here, this one is referred to as the happy or the chord. This breeds a little bit of room. I find it funny that there's this kind of dissonance. But when you add the C major to that note, I think that's gorgeous. How about you? When you play it in different parts with harmonies, what you're seeing is an E major. The major 7 takes that major chord and adds another level of just brightness to it. I think that brightness sometimes is well deserved, and when you get a little bit more into music theory, you realize that that C major had the E minor on top of it, which made the major 7. So ipso facto, the major 7 chord is very closely related to a relative minor chord. When we're going through the process, where'd my pen go? So, there goes my mustache. When we're going through the process of seeing this, the next kind of chord that I really enjoy talking about, besides the major 7th, is called the dominant 7th. This one is one of the best ones because it allows us to see the difference between the major 7th and now C. I mean, you can't put a C minor there because it would change the tonality. But we could put a minor 7th here. That's another great way that we could write this out. Again, the chord construction of this, because this one is a 1, 3, 5, and 7. This one is a 1, 3, 5, and then a flat 7. C, E, G, still a major triad. And then we're not adding just the B in the major 7th part. We're actually adding the B flat. right here. So this one is a major minor 7th. See how I have the EDM? That's how we write it out. So this one has the B, but it's now not just the B, it's the B flat. Meaning, when we're doing chord construction, we have to understand the basic principle. By augmenting anything, we're changing the tone. So if we have a C major, and we know that this is a B, the B flat, even though it has the same surname or sonority type name, it is a flattened tone. So when we play 1, 3, 5, and then this, what happens is, this is the chord that is found in major chords. So if we were playing in the key of C major and doing like a 1, 4, 5, 4, back to 1. That's a 1, 4, 5 progression. It has a C major to an F to a G, back to F, then to C. Well, the relative minor and the major sound good together. And then the 5 chord, the dominant, is where all the tension goes to. If I wanted to go back to C, the best way to do that is to play this G and then add its dominant. And that feels wonderful going back to the C major. Well, let's say I wanted to go to the key of D major and still do a 1 and then a 4 and then a 5, giving us D major, G major, and then A major. So the chord that I would use to get that is the 5th of that chord, D, E, F sharp, G, A. If I were to play the A major triad and then add its 7th tone, not the major 7th, but the dominant 7th or the minor 7th, this chord wants to go to D. Woo! Listen to that what is that? Modulation. So watch this: C major, F major, G major, C. Next time I'm going to use the G7 to show you how the ear really wants to hear that. Now I'm going to take the same chord progression, and rather than hitting the G major twice with the dominant, I'm going to hit the A dominant 7. And then I went to D. This next time I'm going to hit the B and go right back into C again. That allows me to functionally go between 2 different key signatures. Now, a lot of music doesn't do that in the Western ear, but it is chock full in secular and non-secular music alike, all the way, through almost all periods: classical era, romantic era, Renaissance. What happens after the Romantic era and the Renaissance changes a little bit on what type of modal structures we use, but all this is based off of what scale or what mode you want to be using while playing these chords. The next one I'd like to talk about, because we've seen what the major sounds like, we've seen what the dominant sounds like, and you could also call this one the Dom 7. So if you had like a C dominant 7, that would also be a great one to put down as far as your markings that you could write something as. The next one I would probably go to chit-chat about is something called the major minor. It has this major minor and then the 7. That's a great way to put this in here. It's a little long-winded when you put like C major minor 7. So we just shorten that down to a big old M, a little m, and then that 7. It's a much easier way to define a chord when you're looking at a lead sheet, so you know which you're going to be using. But you could also use the Dom 7 as well. One thing that is really kind of cool behind this is because we had that diminished, like a 1 flat 3 and then a flat 5, we could have something called a diminished 7th. That simply means that we have 3 flattened notes. Now let's go over to the piano and we can look at this. We have a C, E flat, a G flat, and then a B flat. You know what? I can write them on the other side. There we go. So what we have here is a C diminished 7, has our diminished sign. You could also put C dim 7. And then, I've seen other people put like a C minor, minor 7. Now what this would do is allows us to see that we've got a C minor, which is C, G, but then we have this 7 here, and what happens is this chord actually is functioning as a flat 5. So what we could say is it's a C minor 7 flat 5. This allows us to hear this kind of chord structure. C, E, G, and B is a C major 7. When we flatten all 3 of these, we get a different chord. Now, our flat, 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 and then flat makes a really cool sound, doesn't it? So if we have a full diminished, and then we have something called a half diminished, there is a different sound. What this means is we're going to still have the 1, flat 3, flat 5, but our difference is on a fully diminished chord, we are going to have a double flat. Now, this arises due to the minor chords, and what happens is there are modes and scales. Now, I'm not going to get in too much to this today because I want this to be another explanation, because depriving just this chord of its full half an hour would be silly. So what we're going to do is we're going to see this as being a C, E flat, G flat, and then, as we aforementioned, B double flat. The reason why we use something like this, it allows us to have more of a, I've seen somebody put an F diminish here. I hate seeing that, so I'm never going to write that. I would just call it as this. When we have a C diminished chord like this, the spelling chord goes C, E flat, G flat, and then a double flat. When I see this, this allows me to know that my fully diminished chord allows for a little space and causes a little bit more more tension. Now, the dominant 7th chord that we talked about up here, it's one of the most used and common types of 7th chords. The second most is the major 7. The reason why the dominant 7 is used a lot, because I said it helps you move between chords and keys and structures. So it's one of the most used. In fact, when we play a 5 chord and then make that 5 chord into a dominant, that's essentially what we're doing in every key. So anytime you see like a D7, your D7 sounds a whole heck of a lot like your F sharp diminished. That's because in the key of G, D is the 5th. G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished. F sharp diminished, the 7th tone, sounds a whole heck of a lot like that 5 dominant. So when going through here, this one is our fully diminished sound. And let's go take a gander at that over the piano. There's a big old difference between having, let's say, a C, diminished, and then adding your diminished tone, which would be your minor 7th, and then double flatting it. Woo! The mystery man was seated at the end of this sketch. Anybody get that Zapper reference? Anyway, the things that I like to do with these chords is to build tension. This happens to be the fully stock list of them. We have our major 7th here. We've got our dominant 7th. The minor 7th in a minor triad, the minor, we would call a minor major chord like we did here, or a major minor chord. The opposite of that is our minor major chord, and that's the one I want to show right here. It's one of the weirder ones. We've got a major 3rd. We're still going to have our major here, and then we've got our, minor here, and then we've got our major 7th, meaning this tone's going to feel a little bit weirder than any of the other tones, generally because this is one of the least used ones. It's used a lot in jazz. So here's our minor, right? And then here's our major tone. A lot of people will know this as being like the James Bond chord. Do 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 do. I hear Debussy in there too a little bit. But then again, it's not a sus. Okay, so this is called our major, our minor major. Now it looks a lot like our diminished, but it doesn't have that tone right there. So this tone, that 5th there, draws more attention to the dominant chord. Otherwise known, I think, as the James Bond chord, if you want to call it that way. It builds a certain amount of unnecessary tension. Again, all of these are used for a specific purpose. C, E flat, G, and then B natural. Now with this major minor, you can call it as a C, I'm sorry, I keep saying that wrong, C minor major. Looks like that. Or you could just do like one of these things where you're drawing like your C major with the 7. So you'd have a C minor with a major 7. And I know that looks funky, but this C is represented by the dash, so you have a C minor, C, E flat, G, and then you would have your major 7th. Now, it is very close to seeing this as this, right? C here, so we've got our C diminished 7. Well, we know that that's built out that way because it has a minor. In none of these do I really have to put the minor mark, except for here when I see this as just being a minor chord that has a major 7th over it. These are our scale degrees that talk about 7th. How do we use those in a practical sense? Well, let's grab another instrument. Close enough. So if we're in the key of, let's say, C major, and I don't know, maybe ukulele is not the greatest choice. How about guitar? Shows the low end and the high end. So on a guitar, if we have a C major, D minor, E minor, F major, the G major, A minor, and then a B diminished, that last one is the weirdest one that we could talk about. But we could turn any of these into the aforementioned 7 chord. That was a common misconception I had when I started playing. In fact, when I started playing, I don't know, 30-something years ago, I was with a buddy of mine and he showed me a D major. I was like, cool, little triangle. And then he showed me something like a D7. I was like, cool, that's groovy. And then he showed me the D minor 7, which is these 2 notes and this. And I was like, when will I ever use that? It's so funny, I use that chord all the time now. So the idea is, don't be overwhelmed by the chord constructions. Learn all your chords for majors or minors. What I just showed you was C major. There's a C, E, G, D, F, A, E, G, B, F, A, C, G, B, D, A, C, E, and then B, D, F. All these chords are, they're kind of hard in their own regard, especially this diminished chord, which can be played a multitude of different ways, actually. Why? Because your fingers can go on 6 strings on a guitar, and you just really need to have 3 notes. It's very weird to play 3 notes on 6 strings. Some double, some triple. Some are in unison, some are octaves. We just learn what they are, so when we're able to define a chord like D major, we would have a D on the lowest note. We would have an A, our 5th, another D, but an octave now, and then we'd have our 3rd, the F sharp. So when we flatten the median, we get a minor. When you look at music, I would urge you to start looking at all music through the eyes of the major. When you view it as a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, you're seeing it as just being in a key signature. So if I said C, well, what is a C sharp? It's nothing more than C major, D. But we learn how to go G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, C sharp, D sharp, E sharp, F sharp, G sharp, F sharp. Each key has a different signature, including those accidentals we talked about. Well, this puts those accidentals in. Let's take that D minor. D minor, when we flatten the root down a half step, we would get D minor like this. So a D minor major chord, this bottom one, is ipso facto an augmented type of chord. It would be a D flat like type of augmented chord. If we were to go to any other thing like 1 down and put our finger on the C, we would still have the F note, which is the minor 3rd. We would have now the dominant 7th of the key of D, because viewed through the eyes of D major, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. So that C sharp is the major 7th. Now we got the minor 7th. And bear in mind, we're still in the key of C major. C major, D minor, E minor. D minor's in the key. So if you wanted to play a jam or a groove and you wanted to, like aforementioned, we had a 1, 4, 5. If you wanted to have like a, what would make sense in a minor harmonic progression? How about, we'll have a 2 chord, we'll have a 5 chord, right? And then the 1 chord. This is an extremely popular progression in jazz. It's called the 2-5-1. Lots of jazz time. Okay, so when we have this D minor, do we necessarily always have to play the 2-5-1 as a D minor, G major, C major? Let's try and make these all into dominant 7th chords. See what happens. Our D major, when we flatten it to a minor, makes the D minor. If we move down our tone, we will play this chord, which is a D minor 7. that D minor 7 can be played right into the G major, but we're going to play it as a G major or dominant 7, right? Adding the F note. G, F sharp, F. Well, if you look at the key of G, G has G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp. F sharp is the major 7. So when you play that, you get that naturally happy type of feel. When you flatten that down another half step, it builds more tension because it's going closer to the dominant, the 5. So if we played a D7 to a G7, and now, rather than just having a C major, we add its dominant 7th. C, D, E, F, G, A, B flat. So this B flat sounds like that. Well, let's hear what that progression sounds like with and without. I wish I had a pick. Now here's with it. It does alter the tone. So as a player, if I was playing with somebody else and playing the standard triads, and then I automatically switch to that dominant there, it allows that lead player to play still the major scales, or in the key of C, we would play D Dorian. So the idea is when we alter that note, it alters what our mode is inside that key. Now, if that's a little bit too much, no worries. We're going to go over modal theory later. And the idea about this is just to leave you with the impression or the taste in your mouth of chord construction so you can start doing this on your own instrument. I would suggest starting off with the major 7 and seeing how that sounds with different chords. So if you were to play like a D major, when we drop our double tone, because aforementioned we had the D, A, D, F sharp. When we drop the 1 down to its major 7th, we bar all 3 of them, and it gives us that nice, open, happy feeling. There's a multitude of things you can do with major 7 chords, but the idea is to lighten it up, have a little more open feeling, and that major 7 allows us to see is we can also play the relative minor of whatever that is. In the key of D, the relative minor is B minor. So when we drop this down, we essentially have a B minor, which is devoid of that 3rd. That is a great way to go about looking at chord construction, seeing one chord affecting another, what that 7th tone note is, and then start playing with that. And the last thing I'm going to leave you on here is this concept. I don't know if this was shown to me or if I just stumbled upon this in the years of playing and do-to-do, but I find that noodling, playing the instrument and doing something like your chord structures like C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C is a great way to move around your fretboard with the 7 tones of a scale. If we were to play in the key of C major, a C major 7, we would be dropping down our C note to a B because we already have an open C. So the C, E, G, which is found naturally on a ook, 1, 3, 5, plus the 7th, gives us that tone. Chord construction, being able to know what a C major is, C major 7, C minor 7, and then being able to play something along the lines of a C diminished, and here with our 1, when we have our 1 there, and then we've got our 5, dropping our 5 down to a flat 5, and then dropping our 3 down to a flat 3, you can see how the chord construction of these make a lot of sense. A lot of us know what the G7 is. Well, that's also a B diminished. A lot of us know what the D7 is. Well, that's an F sharp diminished. There are only 4 strings on this thing, so you got to make a couple compromises as far as what notes get the privilege of being played in that triad and what note is added on. Like playing a B7 here and then having that G doesn't really make sense unless you understand what these double flats and double sharps actually are and how it works with the ear. So the last thing I want to leave you on, no matter what your groove is, let's say we're doing a C major 7, and then we're going to go to F major 7. How about that? It's gorgeous. C major 7 on an oud is played with one finger on the 2nd fret, or if you're advanced, let it layer like you're playing an E minor, and then add one more finger. Remember, in a C major 7, all we're doing is making a major triad, adding an E minor, and now we have our major 7. E minor plus a C major, it equals a major 7 chord. If we were doing it in any other key, it works the same way, the 1 and the 3, boom to bam. If in the key of G major, GBD, well, when we add this note, the triad we're putting on top of that is, guess what? B minor. So if I was playing over the top of C major 7 to F major 7, also you could play an F major on an oud and put your finger down on the E, but it doesn't have as much gravitas as playing just the G and the C string at the 5th. So over the top of this, I would have that 7th tone. And I find, here's the tip I wanted to give. Some of the most pleasing melodies and pleasing notes are constructed at the half step. Meaning, when I'm playing in the key of C major, I have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. I know for a fact that there's a half step between the 3 and the 4, and then the 7 and the 8, the resolution. So B to C is going to sound great. So is E to F. So if I'm hearing how that E to F, just the simple little hammer on and pull off, sounds wonderful. In the key of F, we have F, G, A to B flat. So A is going to also be a great one. Now here's the crux of it. When you're playing F major 7, you can still play C. C, D, E, F, G, A, B flat. When you change that note to B flat, you get something called a C7. Our C dominant 7 is an F major Ionian. When we see triads in the construction of that one note, the major 7th, minor 7th, major 6th, minor 6th, that's where we get a lot of our different modes. By manipulating, augmenting, going up in a tone, or diminishing by going down in a tone, we really give ourselves the ability to hear the full range of those two types of scales. The chromatic, and then the diatonic. So I would encourage you to find out what those steps are: whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, and then find the half steps in every scale. Play your chord over the top of it, even if it's a weird one, like a diminished 7, like that fully or even half. And start moving notes around and see how they affect that original triad. Anyway, I had a great time today. I hope you did too. If you have any questions, put it in the comment section. If I don't know the answer to it, I will get to it, and I will find that answer, and I will get it to you. Other than that, check out Tuesdays when we try and do these live sessions. I talk about different concepts ranging all the way from how to construct a chord, like we did today. Today's session talked about the 7th chord. Now, we will go into how to use that 7th chord with melodies and modes and scales while soloing. We touched a little bit about it here, but we're going to put that one out a little bit. The next session we're going to do here, we're going to talk about going through the process of part writing and songwriting. And what we want to do is do a little bit of music analyzation and then talk about something called figured bass. Figured bass is a way to actually just put notation on the piece of music and then give it to somebody and have them understand that the chords are derived out of their scale position. When we talk about C, E, G, and B, this is the 1st scale position, 3rd scale position, 5th scale position, and 7th. Hence, the chord construction has a triad and then a 7th tone. Other than talking about figured bass, we're going to talk about extension chords, what happens when you go past that 8th note, and then I'm going to give you a little preview to that right now. We use these chords that we just talked about along with the octave. When we go past the P8, we start adding notes. So 8, 9. If I played C, E, G, and D, this would be considered
considered an add 9. The reason why it's not just considered a C9 is anytime you go past the octave, you must include the 7th. I repeat myself. If we had a triad, 1, 3, 5, and we had that as a foundation, and then put a note on, like the 9, it sounds good. But when we have that other note, we have a way more stable foundation. Meaning, adds a little bit more tone and push and pull towards the dominant. Yes, you can still have fabrication. I guess that's a word. You can still have tertiary harmonies that add up and add that together. Thusly, we would add these and we would call them names as they are. C major 9, C add 9, or C9. Anywho, I really enjoyed doing this. If you enjoy this as much as I do, please put something cool in the comment section. Keep it classy and clean if you would. Some of my students watch this stuff. And then ask questions if you have them, and I will get back to you. And subscribe. Right on. Aloha.